Pass those around.
I left all of my other ones home.
You have one, Sue?
Thank you. We got, what, 6?
Carol will have one.
No, I guess.
And is this one 7? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I was gonna say, I think I might, if you got enough. But she's out there busy reminiscing, so. I'm not in a hurry. She's the one. Her.
You having a hot flash?
For about 60 years, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that doesn't go away.
There's, I have hyperhidrosis and I had early menopause and it's never gone away. I
There's
sweat all the time.
a pill on the over the counter that says menopause relief, and it works.
Really.
So this was last week.
Well, I've tried about everything else. I mean, I've had
That's
different
number 6,
specialists.
and
I
that
went
was
to an
last week.
endocrinologist and he did
And this is
all
number
kinds
7.
of tests.
Are
And
we starting at the
after
beginning of it?
a couple
Yeah.
months of tests and
I
whatnot,
think so.
he says, I guess you have to live with it.
Stick it in your ear.
Yeah, that was like 35 years ago.
Well, I don't know if it would help you. It helped me.
And it's just, is it
Over the counter.
it's over the counter, but it's not like Walgreens brand or
I don't
anybody's
remember.
brand.
There's more than one.
But there's a menopause something or other. Okay.
Menopause relief. Yeah.
I'll look.
And there's 2 or 3 different kinds.
Mm-hmm.
They have them in the
Depending.
health food store too,
Mm.
which is really good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Okay, we about ready, Greg?
No,
Yeah, start reading, would you?
Okay.
he hasn't had his breakfast lunch.
Yeah.
and then
You gotta get those little...
Ooh,
Turn it to a different one.
Okay. The Bible, history or myth? The end of fundamentalism. Yay. In the cosmic economy, the divine must always sacrifice its life for the lower ranks of existence. In every religion, a god is pictured as dying for man. There is not an iota of history, as we know it, in the entire Bible. That's Alvin Boyd Kuhn. Our birth is but sleep. You want to do that, Jackie?
okay. False history. The lead article in the March 2002 issue of the prestigious Harper's magazine, entitled False Testament, bluntly stated that the archaeology now refutes the Bible's claim to history.
It went out on me.
oh, it did.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Over the past
Thank
several
you.
years,
Thank you.
dispute over biblical
Historicity.
never heard of that word, has marked scholarly conferences and has been the focus of articles in the New York Times and U.S. News and World Report. A cover story in the December 2002 issue of Maclean's magazine, and a hard-hitting piece by the archaeologist
On the covers over there.
Zev Herzberg.
What's
in the
What's it
Israeli newspaper,
I'd have to go over and get it.
whatever that is.
I could-
So, but anyway,
Haaretz.
yeah. But the Harper's expose by the journalist Daniel Lazer was the most trenchant, even current account I have seen yet. This man knows how to use some words.
Yeah.
Yep. Coon?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Biggest vocabulary I've
Citing
seen.
the most recent evidence, or rather, for the most part, the lack of it, Lazar pulled the foundation out from under almost every major historical beam in the edifice of accepted wisdom about everything from existence
It's
of
out of
Abraham
print,
Oh,
but
okay.
you can
to the
get it
other
on
biblical
Amazon.
patriarchs.
They sell
Yep,
used, and
yep. I'm daughter of a librarian's clerk, but
Okay. All right, Lazar pulled the foundation out from under almost every major historical beam in the edifice of accepted wisdom about everything from the existence of Abraham and the other biblical patriarchs to the Exodus from Egypt, the supposed glories of King David and Solomon, and even the reputed conquest of the promised land, Canaan.
No Abraham? Gosh,
it's kind of surprising, isn't it?
yes. For millions of Jews, Christians, and Muslims, the revelations came as an enormous shock. In the United States, clergy reported that many church members have had their faith severely shaken by this account. According to, quote, "Is the Bible Historical Hooey," end quote, a leading article about the affair of the May/June 2002 issue of the widely circulated Biblical Archaeological Review, BAR,
Yep.
the
Subscribed to it for years.
Me too.
Yep.
The ministers quoted said that the people were demanding to know why, if the Bible is so wholly unreliable as history, they should believe any of it. The absolutist, literalist approach has been so successful that the concept of scripture as entirely allegorical and mythical is still virtually beyond comprehension for most traditional believers. Yet, that is proving to be Christianity's Achilles heel in the present crisis. The old literalism simply cannot withstand the probing of modern thought, research, and scholarship. What was never history to begin with can't masquerade as history any longer. This marks a major, decisive turning point in Christianity's overall story. It brings with it the hope of the recovery of a much more spiritual belief system and experience of God.
Yeah, that 3rd century, 4th century, boy, they just messed it all up.
Well, anybody who taught or believed spirituality and healing and so forth were branded heretics, gathered up, burned at the stake, libraries burned, books and manuscripts burned.
If it wasn't the official church's position, it was anathema.
It was your death sentence.
How Christian of it.
Yeah, how Christian of it.
Something about thou shalt not kill, isn't that somewhere
Isn't
in
that
there?
part of it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's just the Old Testament, you know,
No,
it doesn't
that
count.
doesn't count, yeah. Right.
In the old Bible view, Lazar noted that the Israelites started out in the middle of the 2nd millennium BCE as nomadic band originating in Mesopotamia or Iraq. They migrated first to Palestine, then to Egypt. After years of enslavement, they escaped into the desert under Moses, eventually crossed the Jordan, and in a vicious conquest took over what today constitutes modern Israel. The occupied territories and, back in David's time, much more.
Your flashlight is on.
Lazar stated baldly that on the basis of his research and in a survey of current scholarship, he'd concluded that all of this is bosh. I like that word, bosh.
Yeah, that's a nice
Would somebody
word.
translate that into English for me?
Bogus, yeah.
In the past quarter century, he said, archaeologists have seen one settled assumption over who the ancient Israelites were and where they came from proved false. Instead of a band of invaders who conquered Canaan, the Israelites are now thought to have been an indigenous culture that developed west of the Jordan River around 1200 BCE. The epic stories of Abraham, Isaac, and the other patriarchs appear to have been spliced out of various pieces of local lore. The whole account of David's empire is now viewed as an invention of Jerusalem-based priests in the 7th and 8th centuries BCE who were keen to burnish their national history. He wrote, by the way, a study of comparative religions shows that all ancient peoples did the same. Somebody take the next one.
According to Lazar's findings, Jewish monotheism, that is, the exclusive worship of a Semitic deity called Yahweh,
Yahweh.
or Yahweh.
Yeah, Yahweh.
In Aramaic, it's Yahweh. Yahweh. Where am I?
Jehovah.
Didn't fully.
Didn't
Didn't
fully
fully
coalesce.
coalesce until sometime between an Assyrian conquest of the northern kingdom of Israel in 722 BCE and the Babylonian conquest of the southern kingdom of Judah in 586. The Bible indicates this happened much earlier, as we shall discover. The true origins appeared in Egyptian religious thought.
Oh, well,
The situation gets even more problematical for the traditionalists in every camp. Abraham, as Kuhn had long insisted, was utterly mythological. Quote, not only is there no evidence that any such figure as Abraham ever lived, but archaeologists believe that there is no way such a figure could have lived given what we know now about Israelite origins, end quote, Lazar wrote. In other words, as Kuhn had said earlier, he was a leading figure in the larger myth.
And Lazar didn't stop there. The Exodus never occurred, he asserted, a conclusion he based upon a growing body of evidence about ancient Egyptian border defenses, desert sites where the fleeing Israelites allegedly camped, and so on. The Old Testament description of the conquest of Canaan.
Excuse me for intruding. My apologies.
The conquest of Canaan thus turns out to be fictional as well.
Anybody getting upset yet?
Yeah.
It's kind of knocking down all our nights.
all our good Bible stories.
Yep.
Well, yeah.
And it's okay if they're mythology, the stories are still there. And our focus is to look deeper into the story for the teaching behind it.
And the reality of it is, as myth, it contains more information than as history.
You know how far the walk is from the city of Ur, where Abraham and Sarai started out and got up to Haran? It's 650 miles.
Would take a little while.
It took a while, yeah.
And they did it in a day.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, really?
No.
With which airplane?
But I had to measure all this stuff because I wrote the story about the Queen of Babylon and Jezebel. Told the truth about Jezebel, and I took Jezebel from Phoenicia all the way down to Ur and all the way back again, and took her on into a city that her father built along the Mediterranean coast. And so I had her on ships. I had her learning to run cities, ships, trading. She learned everything. And when she was absolutely aghast when she had to marry Ahab because Israel was a backwater. You know, there was nothing there. And in the Old Testament, they never gave her the name of queen, and she She was the queen regent when her husband was out in battles, which was most of the time. And then when he got killed, she ran Israel for another 10 years from the throne. And she didn't bring Baal worship to Israel. Ahab and his father were already Baal worshippers, and so were all the Canaanites. She didn't bring that, but she got blamed for everything.
She
And I
was a
thought,
woman.
if those writers wanted to find somebody evil to write about, it was Jezebel's daughter Athaliah. That they married her off to some slob of a prince in Judah, and I had her say to her mother, "I'll kill every one of them." And she said, "I'm sure you will, dear." And she did. She did. She got the support of some of the army and the guard and so forth, because they hated this guy too. And finally, she had the whole royal family slaughtered, and she grabbed the throne of Judah for another 10 years until somebody finally assassinated her. But she was the one that was the killer and a man, but it wasn't Jezebel. So I just had to write that novel. Anyway, so much for that little point.
King David, said by the Bible to have been a mighty potentate and empire builder, quote, was rather a freebooter who carved out what was at most a small duchy in the southern highlands around Jerusalem and Hebron, end quote. In fact, there are some archaeologists today who maintain, because of the absence of concrete evidence, that he too never existed. The name David appears in one lone inscription on a stone block or stele from the 9th century BCE, and that's all there is. As Lazar points out, quote, if David and Solomon had been important regional power brokers, one might reasonably expect their names to crop up on monuments and in the diplomatic correspondence of the day. Yet once again, the record is silent.
Fundamentalists who once took delight in evidence from the 193 in the 1930s that the walls of Jericho had on one occasion fallen down, much as the book of Joshua describes. However, Lazar reminds readers that the British archaeologist Kathleen Kenyon, in more recent times, has demonstrated from pottery shards in the ruins that the destruction occurred no later than 1300 BCE, almost 100 years before the conquest, if there was one, could have happened. Joshua may well not have fit the Battle of Jericho after all.
After all. Those walls were what, 1,300 years old? They probably fell down on their own.
Yeah. There was much more, and Lazar had plenty of hard data to support his devastating attack, including corroborative evidence from the recent best-selling book, The Bible Unearthed by Israel Finkelstein, an archaeologist at Tel Aviv University, and the journalist Neil Silberman. Massey and Kuhn were strikingly far ahead of all this present scholarship in their research and conclusions. In Who is the King of Glory, Kuhn mentions Massey's dismissal of the Pentateuch, or first 5 books of the Old Testament, as historical, quoting him in words that seem straight out of the Finkelstein-Silberman book. Massey derides the Pentateuch as an indistinguishable mush of myth and mystery. He said it had, quote, neither head, tail, nor vertebrae, end quote. Had it been real history, particularly the detailed accounts of battles in the book of Joshua, Palestine and Judea ought to be overrun with ancient implements of war and work, of Hebrew manufacture, and of the conquered races. But outside of the Bible story, there's absolutely no evidence to be found of the numberless combats and the devastation of Jehovah's enemies in great battles. Also, the country of a people so rich that King David, in his poverty, could collect millions of pounds to build a temple is found to have been without art, sculptures, mosaics, bronzes, pottery, or precious stones. Similarly, Lazar writes, King Solomon was supposed to have been a master builder and, quote, an insatiable accumulator, end quote, of luxurious items. Quote, he drank out of golden goblets, outfitted his soldiers with golden shields, maintained a fleet of sailing ships to seek out exotic treasures, kept a harem of 1,000 wives and concubines.
That's expensive.
Yeah, and spent 13 years building a palace and a richly decorated temple to house the Ark of the Covenant, end quote. Yet not one single goblet or one brick has ever been found to indicate that such a reign existed. Proofs of Bible history will not be found, says Massey, even if all of Palestine is dug up in the search. Indeed, how fatuous it is to think of digging in the earth to find proof of myths and allegories. No amount of archaeology can ever prove a myth.
Even in Josephus' writings, he was the Jewish historian that escaped to Rome after, I think, the Maccabees went down. And he's a very meticulous, the wars in Israel and so forth, but never is there a mention of these people.
The silence means something.
Well, of course, they claim that, Josephus went over to the Roman side, so he didn't dare write about, yeah, right.
Yeah. The Bar response to Lazar's explosive tour de force was disappointing to anyone looking for a strong refutation. Indeed, I was struck more by the concessions it had to make to Lazar's case than by assurances of there being, quote, another side, end quote. The piece by one of the magazine editors charged that the Harpur's feature presented only one side of a very hot debate in the field, in denying that Abraham ever existed or that the exodus from Egypt, the conquest of the Holy Land, and the grandeur of the empires of David and Solomon were solid facts of history. It didn't give any indication that there might be another side.
Well, there's a metaphysical side, but they wouldn't know what that is.
No, they would not. It's true that Daniel Lazar didn't acknowledge that there are some core conservative scholars who don't dismiss the biblical accounts as summarily as he does. Nevertheless, the case he presented was backed, as noted, by overwhelming evidence, and what was a real eye-opener for many traditional Bible readers was the extent to which the biblical archaeology review editor had to agree with most of Lazar's most damning conclusions. He conceded, for example, that when it comes to the Exodus from Egypt, where Moses leads the Israelites across the Red or Reed Sea into the somewhat absurd and obviously symbolic 40-year wilderness trek, quote, I doubt you'd find many scholars who'd accept the biblical account at face value. We have no archaeological evidence of a man named Moses, of Israelites wandering in the desert, or the events of Mount Sinai. Kuhn wrote a brilliant monograph, The Red Sea is Your Blood. I have that. To show the true symbolic or allegorical meaning of the episode of the crossing of the Red, or correctly translated, Reed Sea.
The BAR editor admitted as well that Lazar's argument that archaeology doesn't support the biblical story of the conquest of Canaan is based not on malice, as some fundamentalists have claimed, but on some very hard facts. He said, the biblical account of the conquest does not have its problems.
Does have its
Oh,
problems.
it does have its problems. The picture formed by archaeology does not match the description in the book of Joshua of a swift military victory by the Israelites. But the issue, he argued, is much more complex than Lazier describes.
The article was equally weak in its response to Lazar's debunking of the stories of the great kingdom of David. The editor wrote, "The paucity of archaeological remains from 10th century Jerusalem is a problem. The capital of a magnificent empire should leave behind some artifacts for us to recover. But that's Lazar's point precisely. The evidence for a large Davidic empire simply isn't there." The BAR commentator is forced to concede that we are far from being able to offer a definitive story of David one way or another.
Yeah. Probably not. Even on such an important topic as Abraham, there is little that can be said to dispute Lazar's claim that he never lived. The Bar editor, rather lamely, it points out that there are, quote, some historical details, end quote, in the Bible stories that mesh with, quote, details of treaties he made with local rulers and the price of slaves, end quote, and the, quote, historical record, end quote. That proves nothing, however. He remains an extremely shadowy, mythical character. In The Lost Light, that's a book by Kuhn, Kuhn makes some startling comments on Abraham, who he says categorically was never a historical figure. Kuhn even unlocks the meaning of the patriarch's name, Abram, arguing it is a combination of the alpha privative, as in the words armoral, and anaxia, and Brahm, as in Vedic or Hindu, and means therefore not Brahm. He writes that Abraham, the patriarch or oldest of the emanations, was not Brahm, the Hindu supreme deity, Brahma, the absolute, but the first emanation from Brahm. He was the first life that was not absolute, but from the absolute, a kind of demigod or sun god.
In the end, Lazier concludes, rather than a chronicle of genuine events, the history that Genesis and other Old Testament books set forth was an artificial construct, a narrative framework created long after the facts, in order to link together a series of unconnected folktales, like pearls on a string. All of this fully accords with the findings of the scholars we have met here. Myth certainly uses historical details at times, and there are many to be found in the Old Testament and the New. But ultimately, a myth, as stated earlier, has to do with eternal truths.
Yeah, there's the bingo right there, the eternal truths. That's what's behind every one of these stories.
It's important to understand the kind of arguments used in reaching such conclusions. For example, Lazar's piece notes how the biblical stories of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob make frequent mention of camel caravans. An instance is that of Genesis 24, where we read that Abraham's emissary, sent to find a wife for his son Isaac, quote, took 10 of his master's camels and left, taking with him all kinds of good things, end quote. But analysis of ancient animal bones, quote, confirms that camels were not widely used for transport in the region until well after 1000 BCE, end quote. That is over 500 years later than the Bible dating for the patriarchs. Nor is there any hint of mention of a person called Abraham in any of the non-biblically related inscriptions and other evidence available. Amazing, because
Yeah.
we take all of this.
And you know, there's one thing in the Old Testament I got fascinated by, and that was the animal, the ass. It was not a donkey, it was not a mule. And I found evidence of it in Egypt, that it was a beautiful small animal, blonde with long mane and tail, very intelligent, very easy to train. And the Jews, only the wealthy Jews could own asses. And in the story of Saul, Saul left his plow and went to find his father's asses, which had wandered away. And I wanted to know what those were. And yes, they were very expensive. They were very valuable. And this is, you think, why would Saul go off chasing a bunch of donkeys? They'd probably come back. No, this was their treasure that was wandering off. So I had to check and see what that animal was. There's nothing much said about it. I just keep researching. I just managed to run onto a few things about the ass that is this beautiful, desirable, intelligent animal.
You think it's extinct now?
Well, we haven't heard anything about it for the last 2,000 years, so
Likely. Yeah.
Unless now they call it something else. That would be a
we call it a
possibility.
Shetland pony now.
Yeah, sounds like a Shetland pony.
It does, it does. And they are beautiful with long manes and tails and highly trainable and so forth.
And I have no idea what is the origin of the Shetland pony.
No,
It
no.
could be from the Holy Land for all I know.
They could have brought them up from Egypt for all we know.
Absolutely, yeah. Everything came from Egypt, and so does
Where is
the-
Shetland?
Well, Shetland is an island.
That's what I
Yeah.
thought.
Yeah.
In-
In,
It is.
in England, yeah.
Yeah, and it's where they dumped some of these ponies off of a ship and they just continued to survive and propagate there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're adorable.
Yeah, except the one stallion I had to take care of, and we called him Happy because he kept his teeth bared all the time.
Really?
And if you got very close, he'd get you.
Really?
So I had to cross tie him really tight so he couldn't move that muzzle. Otherwise, he'd have chewed me up.
Wow.
But he was black with a white mane and tail and fur.
Oh, wow.
He was gorgeous.
That's
Yeah, I bet.
unusual.
Anyway, that may have been the ass.
Page 122. How should we interpret the Old Testament? That's a good question. My own view, expressed in newspaper columns at the time, was that both sides in this ongoing debate should be aware of the salient truth about all ancient Bibles and sacred texts insisted upon by Higgins, Massey, Kuhn, Northrop Frye, Joseph Campbell, and numerous others. These texts were never intended as history in the first place. They're almost purely allegorical, and their true meaning is to be sought beneath the surface. For example, the constant reference to the various captives of the Jews throughout the artificially constructed history of the Old Testament should be understood as the real captivity of the human soul in matter. The theme is really that of incarnation, once again. The following familiar Old Testament stories show that we need to look beneath the surface to know why they were told in the first place. Let's each take one.
You want to cross the Red Sea, Sue? You want to cross the Red Sea?
The crossing of the Red Sea is, according to the allegorical or symbolic meaning, really the entrance into matter. Water always stands for matter in the esoteric wisdom. The well-known story of the 40 years the Jews spent wandering in the wilderness was a mythical construct that was symbolic of the soul's life in the body during its earthly sojourn. This insight is true of the Gospels also, as our exploration will show shortly.
The story of Daniel in the lion's den and the 3 faithful Israelites who survived the fiery furnace illustrate the central theme that life for the soul of each of us in matter is like being exposed to wild beasts, parentheses, our senses and passions, or being tried by fire, temptations, and all forms of suffering. In each case, the trusting spirit within is given the courage and the protection to survive. The divine soul is ultimately imperishable. Yeah, that's nice to know.
And they don't really remind us that that story took place in Babylon. That David practically never lived in Israel or Jerusalem. That he was dragged out of there when the Babylonian king attacked and destroyed the temple and Jerusalem, and Daniel was dragged off with the rest of the people into slavery. And so these stories we hear about Daniel are all in Babylon.
The strange epic story of Samson makes little sense as a literal tale, but it simply glows once the allegorical and astronomical background is known. Samson in Hebrew means solar, and he is plainly a sun god figure, as the Oxford Dictionary of the Christian Church suggests and Kuhn affirms. Delilah, whose wiles eventually stripped him of his prodigious strength, is linked by Massey with the feeble, waning aspect of lunar light, the dark of the moon, a sign of the sun's weakening each month. In the saga, she shears off Samson's hair, symbolizing the sun's loss of its halo of powerful rays. As a result, Samson, like Horus, has his eyes put out. His light is extinguished temporarily, but in the conclusion, as he brings down the great theater holding his enemies and kills 3,000 Philistines, he wins victory over his foes.
The story of Gideon is another variation on the theme. He has his greatly outnumbered troops surround the enemy by each night. Each soldier holds a candle hidden in an earthen pot or a vase, and then suddenly breaks it open to flash an encircling ring of light. His foes, hearing the cry, "The sword of the Lord and of Gideon," from the hilltops surrounding their camp, and seeing the many lights, run for their lives. The hidden meaning is that the light within each of us, the Christ, can, as St. Paul says, overcome all things.
There are several perplexing passages in the Old Testament, and at least one in the New, where women far beyond the age of childbearing, women who have been barren all of their whole lives, suddenly and miraculously become pregnant and give birth.
We know that's a myth, right?
Yeah.
Sarah, the wife of Abraham, is one. Hannah, Samuel's mother, and Elizabeth, the mother of John the Baptist, are two others. What do these strange miracles really mean? Kuhn explains that each is a type or symbol of the evolutionary process. The mineral stage is followed by the vegetative, and that in turn is followed by the animal. Halfway through the age of the animal kingdom, in geology and biology, this would be billions of years after the Big Bang, the stage of incarnation, parentheses, that is the dawning of self-reflective consciousness, in parentheses, raises the animal to the human. Late in time, behold him come, offspring of the Virgin's womb, matter, as the carol says. The late birth of singular heroes such as Isaac, Samuel, and John the Baptist, symbolizes the fact that our evolution as rational, soul-bearing animals has come well on in God's overall plan for this cycle or eon age.
The Old Testament is not a historically accurate record of events, but the story of a people's evolving understanding of God and of God's relationship with our humanity. The New Testament. What about the New Testament then? Surely here, if anywhere, in Holy Writ, we are on historical terra firma. But once you realize, as I have been arguing, that ancient authors writing about God and God's ways with individuals and nations always use metaphor, myth, poetry, allegory, parable, and a host of other devices to describe eternal truths, you have to ask why they would suddenly stop at the beginning of the Christian era. The truth is that they didn't. The Gospels in particular may sound a little bit history in places, but most biblical scholars today agree that they very are far from what we moderns understand by that concept. The Gospels, however, they originated, were religious dramas used for worship and as a form of evangelism. They were meant not to impart history, but to buttress and convey belief. The editor of John's Gospel, the least historical of them all, boldly and honestly states his aims in the text itself when he says, quote, "But these things are written so that you may come to believe that Jesus is the Messiah," end quote. The goal is to establish the faithful and to create new converts, not to create an authentic biography.
Somebody. Luke tries to make myth into history. Luke's gospel opens with the statement that he is adding to his account to those already written by many others in order to set forth the truth about the Jesus story. This carries an appealing impression of concern for history. He names names and gives the illusion of firm dating. But the early chapters of this work are filled with non-historical, highly symbolic, and mythical narratives. For example, when Mary bursts into the soaring verses of the Magnificat upon hearing that her aged relative Elizabeth is also with child, it is given as a spontaneous moment. But anyone of good sense can tell that this psalm is a well-crafted, well-studied piece of midrashic writing, in other words, imaginative commentary, that nobody, let alone an untutored girl, could improvise. Scholars are quite aware that this psalm expands on and repeats Hannah's song in
1 Samuel.
In 1 Samuel chapter 2. It has nothing historical about it.
Next, Luke tells how a decree went out from Augustus that, quote, all the world should be registered, end quote. The trouble is that there is absolutely no trace in a well-documented period of such a decree. It's simply a means of getting Joseph and Mary to Bethlehem for the theological reasons. The Messiah had to be of Davidic descent and thus from Bethlehem. Luke says the birth occurred while Quirinius was governor of Syria. That means it could not have happened before 6 CE, the year we know he took office. At the same time, Matthew says Jesus was conceived while Herod the Great was in power in Judea. But Herod died in 4 BCE. The authors of the Jesus Mysteries point out that Mary's real miracle, if both references are taken as genuinely historical, was a 10-year pregnancy.
God forbid.
Oh, Lord, I was thinking those very words.
For Matthew, Jesus' hometown was Bethlehem. For Luke, it was Nazareth.
As we have already seen, the stories of the angels and the shepherds in Luke and of the wise men in Matthew are rewrites of Egyptian mythological themes from at least 2,000 years earlier. They are portrayed in the art at Luxor. There is no historical record of Herod's alleged edict regarding the slaughter of the innocents either. Common sense tells us that such an order was an impossibility in any case. Did Herod intend to kill the children of his friends, his soldiers, his civil servants, tourists passing through, and so on? You know for certain the whole matter is symbolic once you realize that an attempt to slaughter a holy child appears in all of the ancient hero myths, from Moses to Horus to Sargon to Hercules. As noted earlier, the threat to the newly born Horus, the Egyptian Christ, came from Herut, the serpent.
Then there's the matter of the 2 genealogies of Jesus in Matthew and Luke. Clearly, they have nothing to do with history and everything to do with myth. Luke traces the family history to Adam because his story is universal. Matthew traces it to Abraham because he's interested in establishing the Jewish line of descent. But both accounts give the show away when they come to their conclusion. Both show clearly that on the father's side, Jesus was, as was compulsory for the Jewish story, a descendant of David. But they fail to point out how utterly irrelevant this really is, since in their view, Joseph wasn't the real father at all. It was a virgin birth. The myth required this. There's more historically. Virgins don't have babies. But stories of virgin births abound in myths. Stars don't stand over houses or stables, and they don't lead people west, especially when they appear in the east. But they do occur in every ancient myth. Every early Messiah figure was heralded by a star. That's the point. Wow.
It's my partner wondering where I am.
Is she in the building?
Yeah, she's
Oh.
out there talking to,
Somebody.
what's her name? Edina? Starts with that. I want to say
Esther?
Edith. Esther.
Esther?
Esther.
Okay.
Yeah, Esther.
Yeah.
Hell no, I didn't find it. It's in here.
The prodigal son.
Anyway.
Oh, do that. Yeah.
This is one of the best known stories told in the Gospels, found only in Luke. Pardon me. It has been
There is
preached
me.
about, dissected, and written about
Phone number, that's my email. I mean my.
quite
what do you
literally
call it?
millions of times.
Yeah, email. And you can text on that number.
And what do you want me to do?
I want your information actually. I don't know, just to
Okay.
communicate.
Yeah. And just
Sorry.
so you know, I don't do Facebook.
Okay, I
We
don't
have a
need-
Facebook account,
I have
but
never.
I don't ever have anything to do with it.
I have never been on Facebook.
Yeah, I don't like
So
it.
there you go. We're compatible.
In finding the still point, I discussed it and tried to show that the point where the lost son came to himself was the central one that everyone depended on. He realized his unique inner self, and it turned him completely around. From the esoteric allegorical viewpoint, however, the meaning lies even deeper yet. The story is actually a classic exposition of the incarnational theory.
Incarnational theology.
Okay.
Somebody here knows it.
I have been describing
Yeah, zip code, all of a
Throughout.
sudden I don't have it. What's the zip code here, Sue?
64106.
Okay.
Phone
The-
number.
the prodigal son represents
Do you read texts?
the hidden drama of the soul.
Do you read texts? on your phone?
Sometimes.
Okay.
I don't live with a phone in my hand.
Neither do I.
I leave it in the car, I leave it here. Sometimes it's days before I ever look at it.
I don't have one.
I'm sorry.
It lives in my head.
When
I'm
we-
coming.
when
I knew
we-
she would do that eventually.
Sue, what's the phone number here?
Huh?
What's the phone number?
816-421-6446.
When we enter into matter,
Thank you.
Okay, where are we?
when we
Jackie.
enter into matter,
And I find this
taking
extremely
upon
interesting.
us a body and embarking upon a lifetime of experience, we are truly going off into a far country to be tested, fed on scraps compared with our true spiritual heritage, degraded and alienated in many ways. One day, however, true enlightenment dawns.
Nice to see you again.
Yeah, where's home, by the way?
Michigan.
Yeah, you told me that.
Right there, on Lake Michigan.
Oh, I've been there. Actually, I've been over here
Okay.
and up there.
My son
Thanks for
was
being here.
Michiganders are kind of weird. Sorry for interrupting, and but thank you for letting me join and totally be enthralled with. I wish I had heard the earlier chapters. I'm going to try and find this.
See if you can get it. If you can't get it, I'll
Yeah,
put
the
a
books are
set
on
of those.
Amazon.
You'll connect.
They are on
They're on
Amazon.
Amazon, yeah.
Yeah.
Dan ordered it from somewhere. I don't
Yeah.
know
Well,
where.
I'm kind of library savvy, so
And do you know thrift books?
yeah. Well, is that something online?
Well, the
Online.
library could order it for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know lots of librarians. So.
I love this guy's work. I've been
It-
following his work, and
It's like, wow.
it's like he wrote this for me, and then he made his transition.
Really?
Yeah, he just-
What's his background?
his background?
Yeah. Is he, what it mean is he's not a Jew?
No,
No.
no. He was an Anglican priest.
Okay.
He was a
Still,
teacher in several
Seminaries?
seminaries, yes, of Bible and Greek, Hebrew, and he also can read some others, which is how he got into all of this.
Gosh.
And
yeah, and I'm,
when he wrote this and put it out, he got all kinds of
oh, shit.
Oh,
Yeah,
nasty
yeah.
stuff.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
Traditional
Surprised it's not
fundamentalists
right. Yeah, right.
will tear you apart on
Oh.
it. Oh, they can't step outside of it.
Oh.
The Bible says it's true.
It's
That's
true.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's true.
They lose
It all happened. It's all real.
It all
Yeah.
real. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Nice meeting you all. Thank you for
meeting
letting
you.
me
Have a
join
good
you.
trip home. When do you go home to?
We're on our way.
On your way, driving then?
Yeah. Diane's. We're in her car, and we'll be staying overnight in Springfield. In Illinois,
Yeah.
capital. of
Sue's
Illinois.
son is in Michigan.
Upper Michigan.
Oh, in the UP.
Yeah,
Okay.
he's a Yooper.
He's a
Yeah,
Yooper.
Uper, yeah.
A Yooper. Yep.
I
Well,
lived in
thank you.
Kalamazoo for 10 years.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you
Okay.
very much.
And thanks for being here.
Yes, yes.
And have a good trip
Well,
home.
I won't wait 15 years before I come back again.
Yeah, that's too long.
Yeah, and
I don't know, 15 years from
Yeah, we
now,
don't buy green bananas anymore.
I'll be Sue's age.
You know that saying.
15 years from now, I'll be about your age.
Don't buy green bananas.
We don't
'cause
buy
we're-
green bananas anymore because we might not be here by the time they're ripe.
Right.
Probably by the time I'm 95, I'll be retired.
Maybe.
well, keep up the good work.
Have a beautiful trip home.
Yes, have a good trip.
Okay, bless you, bye-bye.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Okay, let's do prodigal
We're,
son, and
we're,
then
we're down to one day,
we're down.
Okay, we're just down to one day, huh?
Where's one day?
halfway down the
The page.
prodigal son.
5, 6, 7, 8 lines from the bottom.
One day, however, true enlightenment dawns. The divinity within is recognized. The sleeping Christ is awakened, and we return home to the waiting Father. The welcome accorded the prodigal son is an allegorical reference to the ultimate rejoicing of the soul's glorious resurrection on the other side. Other details in the story, such as the carping of the elder son, were likely added later, either because of a failure to see its true esoteric sense or to score points in the early Christians' squabble with the synagogue.
Period.
Yeah, okay.
That's good. That really is good. So what do you think of the interpretations?
Yeah.
They make sense, do
Sure.
they not? Yeah.
There are an awful lot to encompass, though.
Yeah. I agree, absolutely.
If
But
you're
we
in
didn't
the-
get to where we are in 3, 4, 5 weeks, 6 weeks.
Yeah.
In our lives, with the beliefs and attitudes and everything. So sometimes it's a little stretch here, and beginning to see how we put our spiritualism back in a way we can understand it.
Yeah.
And
If you've ever eaten corn husks, you'll know there has to be something better.
exactly.
That's what he ate in the pig's sty.
Oh,
Yeah,
oh.
corn husks.
Oh,
the husk is nasty,
Nasty stuff.
but inside, I love corn on the cob.
Yeah. Doesn't-
Absolutely
The
love
pigs probably ate that part
Yeah,
because they
they
were
did.
smart.
You probably ate the cob too.
Yeah.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
but when you
Yeah.
don't know, you try to eat. Yeah. I've had several examples of this one, but one Christmas I was at Bishop Williams, and his wife is Indian, and a great Indian cook, and I love her Indian food. So we had Indian food on the table, and we had there was a dish of what they call pickle. Now it's not like a pickle we pick up; it's pickled something,
Pickled corn husks.
and it has some kind of seed in it. I didn't know. I took a piece, I put it in my mouth, and I got into crunch, crunch, and I looked around, and I ate the thing, the whole
You
thing.
were supposed to open it?
Yes, I was supposed to take the seed out,
oh,
and I'm crunching on the seed. Yeah.
that's always,
When you're in a strange country with
Yeah.
strange food, you don't know what to do.
Yes, there have been things I've seen on the menu and I think, I wonder if I eat that. I guess I won't try it.
My most famous is in the town where, what's her name? The one that was burned at the stake.
Joan of Arc?
Joan of Arc, yeah. In France. Nice restaurants, just a short distance from where she was burned at the stake.
Murdered.
Went into this nice restaurant and I was looking at the menu and I looked across to another table and this man had this beautiful sausage on his plate and he was relishing every bite. And I thought, wow, that looks good.
Mm-hmm.
He's absolutely enjoying it thoroughly. I ordered it. It came, and it was beautiful. The browning on it was just gorgeous. And I cut a slice. I got it on the fork, and I got up to here. I had a hard time getting it in my mouth.
Why? Did it
It
smell?
smelled like poo.
Oh!
Some friends of mine had that same experience in by the Golden Gate Bridge. They always went by this restaurant. It was 3 stories. It was a green color, and there were no signs. And they decided one night to stop there. Well, it was a Korean restaurant, and nobody spoke English. Not the menus in English, so they did the same thing. They ordered whatever the people next to them had. Laura said, "It smelled like shit, it tasted like shit, and that's what we did all night long."
I choked
Chitlins?
down 3 bites.
Oh, God.
That's as far as I got.
The same as chitlins?
Yes. It's the French version of chitlins. Now, I from talking to black people, one time there was a black woman who, she brought chitlins so I could try them.
Oh, gosh.
Oh, yes. But I understood from talking with her and others that they boiled the heck out of them.
Try
Be
to make
sure
them
they
clean.
clean
Clean it
because
out,
it's intestine, you know what goes through the intestine, yes?
Right.
Well, the French, they tie it up.
Oh, so it makes sure it stays in there.
Yes.
Each to
Get
his,
all the deliciousness out of it, yes.
right. Each
That
to his
was
own notion. That's a
Awful.
woman that kissed a cow.
Andouillette. Oh my God.
Is that what it's called?
Yes,
Andouillette?
I will never order anything that looks like that.
Andouille?
Andouillette.
Andouille.
That's what they call it in France.
That's the undulation and the
Yeah. Oh, and that's exactly it.
Yeah.
I said to my folks, I said it tastes exactly like
yep.
shit. Yep. I could have said, oh shit, and then you would have said, oh,
We
really?
quit saying
I
that.
think
It
I'll
was-
order that too.
Yeah, we're not going to say that anymore, huh?
Oh man.
God, it's-
How would you know it tastes like that?
I don't know either. I wasn't there. But considering what
That's a good-
happened all night long, you can guess that if it
Oh.
smelled the same, it probably tastes the same. Well, we're at the case study of raising Lazarus.
What are you looking at? No, we're at the sower.
The sower.
We have about
Oh, we're at the
only
sower
7
yet, aren't we?
pages or
Gotta
so
sow
to
something
do,
yet.
so we'll do that next week.
Okay.
Is this pretty interesting?
It's amazing.
Yes.
It's
At first, it's like, well, this didn't happen and that didn't happen, but we've been told that it really was like that. They did this, and they came and they did all of these things, and they didn't. It was part of the teaching. And the story is the teaching. It's not the history of it. The story has all the pieces that begin to come together to make a spiritual story out of it,
Yeah.
you know?
And that word midrash is the Jewish interpretation of the Old Testament. So when the kids go to school to learn about this Old Testament, they learn midrash.
Yeah,
And that's written by the rabbis.
yeah. Yeah, so, anyway,
Lambs also talked about the fact that, I don't know if it was in Egypt or what, but there were places where if some hero, we'll say, fell out of favor, all references to them and all monuments that may have been in praise of them were destroyed.
Yeah, that was Egypt. That was done in Egypt.
Yeah, I thought it was Egypt.
Yeah. That was Akhenaten when he threw away all of their gods and worshipped the sun. When he died, they threw away the sun and worshipped the
Went
little
back,
gods
right
again.
back where they'd been,
And right
yeah.
back where they started.
Yeah.
there's about three sections that I think we ought to go through. Seeing the Gospels with new eyes, that would be a nice thing to give us some ideas of how to start looking at these things. And then, where's the next one? Was there a Jesus of history? That's an interesting.
It's a maybe,
History?
maybe not thing.
Yeah. Was there, in other words, was there a real person named Jesus?
I see.
We had one in the church with Rocco in California.
Yeah.
Only they pronounce it Jesus.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I read a phone message once. Jesus had called